G'day viewers, it's Phil from Jen and Phil, or Phil and Jen in the Philippines. Another vlog this morning. It's approximately 7 o'clock, 7:15 in the morning. Woke up and of course checked all your messages and decided after some consultation with Jen to talk about the next subject. Unfortunately, this is just a talking head thing, but I think it's important. It's the acquisition or the acquiring of land in the Philippines by expats. Not so much as far as condominiums or flats or apartments are concerned, but the trap that we often fall into as expats trying to do the right thing and purchasing land. I might stop this video a few times to gather my thoughts because I want to cover everything, but here we go. Before we go, as usual guys, I think we're sitting on 873 subscriptions. Really appreciate you guys. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up, the notification bell, all that type of thing, and it helps with the channel. Okay, acquiring land. There's some golden rules to start off with, and I know for a fact it's not going to affect a lot of you guys out there, but it will affect some, and so I'll give you the golden rules. First of all, never, listen to me, never ever buy land over the internet. And when I mean to say, what I mean to say as far as acquiring land over the internet, if you have a relationship, whether you are married, whether you are a long-term talking to and have intentions of marrying a young lady, and it's brought up that you should, or you believe, by buying land it can pave the way for your future existence here in this country, and your fiance, your wife, is telling you on the internet when you're in your home country, there's a piece of land down the road, baby, we can buy that and we can do this business or that business, or we can put a house on it. Whatever the reason, never buy land via the internet. And as ridiculous as that sounds, there are plenty of guys that have done it, especially guys that have come over a couple of times. They're still in their home countries. They've gotten married, returned with the intention of returning at a specific date, and they've been lured into the temptation of buying a piece of land. Do not do it, guys. And that's not to say that your wife, fiance, and whatever is trying to con you. The system here of title is extremely complicated, and it's fraught with danger. So that's the first thing. If you are not physically in the country, you do not buy land. That's golden rule number one. Number two is the specific types of title you can get over here and the way you can purchase and acquire land. Do not, this is another do not, take for gospel that when you are told that land is of clear title and it's obvious and it's advertised over here in local papers, or someone will come up and say they have clear title, never ever accept the fact that it has clear title, even if the vendor is showing you a title, because unfortunately here a lot of the documentation has caveats. A lot of the documentation here is just false. There is a number of reasons which I won't go into, but just don't take it for granted simply because the vendor says land is clear title and can show you a title. Do not take it as clear title. Be very suspicious. It may be clear title, but there's a certain amount of checking you must do even on what appears to be clear title. So you'll have to do your due diligence. Now the other thing is, everyone that comes from outside this country and outside Southeast Asia believes that they are better educated and that they will not be fooled because they're not stupid, and that they'll go through a certain set of checking and this type of thing, and they won't get fooled. The first thing you've got to understand about land in Asian countries, and I'm talking about Thailand as well, but not so much as it is here in the Philippines. The whole legislation is geared in this country for Filipino land of any description to remain in the hands of a Filipino. Now, that's not to say that a Westerner in collaboration with a Filipino or a national can't purchase land. That's the first thing. But the legislation is written that when we're talking about land, dirt, pieces of their country, the whole legislation is designed for Philos not only to acquire land, but to keep land. So my advice to you is this. If you go to purchase or prenda, which I'll go into later, land, and if you decide that you want to build on that land, in the back of your head, you must understand this: when push comes to shove, through whatever circumstances, you must be prepared to lose that development at any time to either your partner, via a breakdown of marriage, or at worst a con. So the situation is this: whenever you build, you must be prepared or have the understanding that this could go pear-shaped at any time. Do not come to this country and think the basis of law and protection you had in your own country, whether it be common law or not, will protect you over here. Now, it sounds like I'm giving you a horror story. There are plenty of people that with their wives and their girlfriends that have purchased land, have lived happily ever after, even when it goes pear-shaped, have come to an agreement, and unless you can prove, when I say come to an agreement, if you believe you've been swindled out of your money via land, you can obtain assistance from the Filipino government. People like Rafi Telfo, he will assist a lot of Westerners that have been swindled out of land, who's a celebrity over here and a Mr. Fix-It. But the legislation isn't geared 100% to the Filipinos, but if you're in a long-term relationship, you've been married for a time, and that breaks down, the land will no doubt, in the eyes of the court, go to the Filipino partner. Now, what arrangements you make to get any money out of that after a relationship breakdown is totally up to you. And I'm not going to go into that. We're talking about acquisition of land. Now, let's talk about the various titles. Yes, there is clear title, and that's the best one to obtain. But you've got to do your checks to make sure that title is even real. The second type of title is title, which is not necessarily clear, as in the name of the vendor, but the vendor may have liens against that property from the government, such as unpaid taxes, which may stretch back to God knows how long. So all these things must be looked into before you purchase. The other thing is over here, if you find a block of land, everything appears to be okay, you haven't done any checks at this stage of the game, I suggest to everyone, and I'm talking now mainly about rural land, where a lot of you guys are going to go, where a lot of these girls come from. They're in the provinces and whatever. It's a little bit different in major cities, but these principles can be applied even to land or housing or whatever in major cities. We'll talk first about provincial land, and that's what they call a lot here. It's just a vacant piece of land, few coconut trees on it, that type of thing, and for whatever purpose you want to use it for, it's totally up to you. We're also talking about agricultural land, because a lot of you guys will come here and try to do the green acres thing, where you'll be becoming self-sufficient, grow corn, grow rice, whatever it happens to be. So the majority of land that goes into dispute in this country is usually rural land. Now, the other titles that you can come across is conjugal land. Now, conjugal land, even though it may be a title piece of land, has been inherited by siblings. Now, because people here, as soon as they acquire land, and they're not required to do it, the legislation states they should, but in reality, the majority of land in this country, the title is not passed officially. It's just assumed that those siblings, after the death of their parent, will obtain that land, and money's hard to get here. And Filipinos don't like spending money on something they can't see or is not directly beneficial for them. So, and because the government don't actively pursue these charges, they don't change title. It remains in the previous person's title until, because it's a que sera type situation, they're not real interested in it, in changing the title and spending the money until they possibly want to sell it. And even then they can go into an agreement type situation with the local where they don't have to pass title and pay the money and the duties and the outstanding taxes. Because to get title put into your name, all the taxes must be paid. So Filipinos really on the whole do not understand and why they should do this type of thing, and they'll put it off until they get into a financial situation where they have to sell it. And if they sell it to another Filipino in that Purok and whatever, he understands the situation with land title, and he too doesn't want to draw attention to that purchase via government department, so he'll accept the fact via another agreement that he'll take possession of the title. In your particular cases, what we're looking for is clear title, or as clear a title as possibly you can find. Another title is prenda title. Now, prenda is a subject unto itself, and I'll put it to a little bit later, but keep that in the back of your mind. It may be known as different titles in different parts of the Philippines, but in Mindanao and Visayas and whatever, you can prenda. As I said, we'll get on to that. Then there's mother title. Now, mother title is the first time that land was registered and is held in the name of the first person that ever acquired it. Now, mother title you'll come across quite readily in this country, and it may be a cruddy old piece of paper that obviously looks its age. It's been written in a legal sense via typewriter. It has various stamps on it, and it will stretch back to, it may even stretch back to before the Second World War, where a lot of, say for instance, Mindanao was settled after the war or just before the war. So mother title is still in existence here. And of course, generations have acquired that property. It's been passed down through generations, through to siblings and whatever. But the mother title has never been changed. The tax on the land has never been paid. The transfer has never been done. So it's a virtual minefield as far as titles are concerned. Then we have prenda title. Now, prenda title is an agreement. It's not officially a title on land. Prenda is something they do here, and it's akin to pawnbroking in one respect. A lot of farmers that have land that may run short of money will put the word around them in the Purok that they want to get rid of a certain parcel of land temporarily. And they'll put a price on that, like a hireage. And someone will come forward and they will swap the use of that land via prenda for a percentage of money, a certain percent of money, or an agreed amount of money. And under an agreement that is witnessed by a lawyer, they will take possession. The party that is looking to possess the land will take possession at an agreed amount of money from the vendor or the owner of that land. And they will, part of that agreement usually is, say, it may be a rice field. We'll use figures just to keep it simple. The guy comes in and he says, I want that 1 hectare of land. I want to expand the rice field. I'll give you 150,000 pesos, which is roughly $3,000 or US. And I'll take it on prenda. Now, as a part of that, a percentage of that rice will also go and serve as interest on the prenda. So they'll give them 150,000, and then they'll agree to so many sacks of rice, if it's a rice field, that will be delivered every harvest to the owner. So that's a very basic understanding and agreement. Now, 9 times out of 10, prenda agreements have no expiry date. And the only way the owner of that particular land can obtain that land back is if he one day comes up with the original 150,000 pesos, takes back the land and pays the guy originally, the purchaser for want of a better word, the renter, the 150,000 pesos back. Now what happens here quite often is that the prenda will be out there, the land will be used by the person that's paid the 150,000 or the 200,000, depending on what they've agreed to. And years will go on, and the owner will increase the prenda. He'll go to the person and say, listen, I know you've put 150,000 down, but I need more money. For you to continue the prenda, you'll have to pay me an additional 50,000. Now, of course, then it becomes a 200,000 peso prenda. Now, it's not unusual for people to have land under prenda for 5, 10, 15, 20 years because the original owner of that land has never been able to acquire that much money to give back to the renter to get the land back. And what happens in unscrupulous cases is that, especially if the person that owns the land and his family move away for some reason or are out of the area, some unscrupulous people look for a sucker, and virtually because of the time they've had it, a lot of people believe that they own it, will try to sell off that land. So you can understand that they represent themselves as being the owner of the land when they're really not. And they try to sell it off to an unsuspecting person from outside the Purooks, or a dopey Westerner that'll believe anything because he's been smiled at, or someone that just doesn't understand the system here. Then there's the acquisition of normal title land. There's the type of thing, as I said, conjugal land. A person will be given a piece of land by his father or his mother or whatever that has since passed away, and that land will be divided up amongst the siblings, and he has the title and the understanding. Everyone knows in the Purook that so-and-so owns that piece of land. And it comes to a time when he may wish to send his kids to university and whatever, he needs money, so he decides to sell a piece of land. Well, that's all good, and he has full entitlement to sell that land. But being conjugal, being originally owned by the family, he cannot sell that land until all the siblings agree. Even though he has full use of the land, everyone recognizes that he owns the land, it's still conjugal land. So whenever you do a purchase of that kind, you must find out whether it's conjugal, and you can do that, and I'll tell you how shortly. And then you must get all the siblings together, and they must sign that they agree through letter of authority that he has the ability, and they have no objection to him selling that piece of land. So as I speak, you can see how convoluted purchasing land and what you've got to look out for, how convoluted the process is here. And we're not even talking unscrupulous. We're not even talking the big con. We're talking about following a system that's very, very complex. How does one make sure what they're buying they can buy in partnership with their wife or fiance? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. People here stay away from government offices, like the plague. So it's not unusual they don't register these purchases. We'll start at the start. Any agreement must be handled by a lawyer. Now, I know that's preaching to the converted. We wouldn't consider buying land unless a lawyer was involved on both sides. Or the vendor, not wishing to spend the money, allows your lawyer to handle it. Okay? One, there must be a lawyer involved. And please, try to choose a lawyer that knows nothing about the vendor and is probably in the next township rather than the town you're at, if you're in a small town like Mehitum or some of the smaller towns like Massim and whatever. Try to obtain a lawyer with a good reputation and that consciously or subconsciously can't be involved in any form of bias towards the vendor simply because he's a fellow and you're an interloping expat. So you've selected your solicitor. This is the other thing that why people try to stay away from lawyers. When they witness or do a deal over here on behalf of an expat or on behalf of a Filipino client, the charge rates are calculated on how valuable that contract is. Now, there's no hard and fast rule. There's no book you can go to and say, this is how much he should charge. What you do is when you're finding out what it's going to cost you for the lawyer's fees as well, you go in and say, this is the land, this is the dimensions, and he will, and ask him there and then, how much is it going to cost me for you to do the legals on this particular piece of land? And then at least you're forewarned and forearmed. If you don't do that, and you appear that you have plenty of money, the price will go up and up. The more expensive the piece of land, the more your lawyer will charge for you. And this not only goes for land deals, this will go for any agreement you have signed by a lawyer or witnessed by a lawyer. If it regards a large amount of pesos in any form of agreement, the price of that signature, which you do require by law from a solicitor, an affidavit from the solicitor to say this is all true and correct, will be proportionate to the contract and what you're actually dealing with. In my country, you would go to a commissioner of oaths and affidavits, or you'd go to a public signatory, and it doesn't matter what the price of the contract is, it would be, if not free, only a token amount. So that doesn't occur. Over here, it basically is, as I said, if it's an expensive contract, it'll be an expensive signature. That lawyer, once you have to instruct the lawyer to register the land. So he will actually do that if you instruct him to. But if you're only asking him to put forward a contract that you're happy with, that's all he'll do. You must instruct here. And of course, for every instruction, there'll be an additional charge. So it's not cut and dry. Okay, you've found a piece of land and you're contemplating, would like to purchase, or at least inquiring into purchasing it. The first thing you do is find out that the land you're buying and will be on the contract is the land you're looking at. Get the land surveyed. Now, the vendor will not survey that land because it's an expense he doesn't want to get into. So you'll have to go out and get a surveyor to look at the land so you know exactly what you're paying for. And the reason I say get a surveyor is over here land has been passed down, and previous to you coming along, the whole area knew the boundaries of the land via, the land goes, as an example, the land goes to the corner where that large coconut tree is, and then it goes across and it finishes at that house. And then it comes down here to this road. And that's as far as the majority of people in the provinces know how to measure out the individual lands. Yes, on the original contracts they'll have measurements, but trees grow, die, fall down, other ones are replaced, and land either expands or contracts. So, in essence, get it surveyed. Then, of course, get your lawyer. But before you get your lawyer and you start forking out money, you have a copy of the documents, such as whatever title they're putting up. Remember this, it may not be in their name, but they may have legal right to that title, and they will explain to you that, say for instance, Moses or Harold or whomever the title is in was my great-great-grandfather, and it was passed down through the family. The easiest way to find out if what they're saying to you is the truth is get your wife or girlfriend to start mingling with the Filipinos in that area and asking about the land. The one thing Filipinos are good at is other people's business. And they're quite happy to tell you what they know about land, about families and whatever. So if your Filipino girlfriend or wife starts to wander around and starts to talk to people, and she'll ask the question, is that land owned by so-and-so, or who owns that land? And they will be quite happy to tell you, oh, that's Moses' grandson, or whatever, Eric, or whomever it may be. So the initial inquiry as to ownership of land, and the cheapest way to do it, is just ask around who owns the land. And the next questions you ask people is, any trouble with that land? Because land in dispute over here is a horrible set of circumstances, and that may be a neighbour dispute, it may be a dispute on the land, and to have a dispute on land over here, you don't necessarily have to have the paper. Someone says that they had an agreement with the father of the previous owner that they could use this, or they could harvest coconut trees off that, and it was well known within the Purok that that was the agreement, even though it's not on paper, will be held up in court through affidavits from witnesses, and all of a sudden you have land in dispute. Now, a lot of siblings, to get out of that dispute, because they can't do anything, they won't allow, while land is in dispute, you cannot, under the legal system here, carry on regardless. Everything comes to a grinding halt. And a lot of people here think, rather than go through the dispute process, which may last years, I'll just get rid of the land. So it's no use you purchasing a problem. So these are all the things you've got to, and this is only in the first few days, and that's why it's important that you're here, Johnny on the spot, doing all this. Don't let your enthusiasm get carried away simply because there's what appears to be a title there. The second thing is this. There is a lands office here in the Philippines in most major centres. It may require you to travel 100-200 kilometres depending on the size of the municipality that you're dealing with and the area you're dealing with. And certain lands offices will take charge of a myriad of different municipalities and Puroks. Now, unfortunately, you can't ring up here and say, can you check on this? You must get in the car and travel. If you're lucky, it's only a short distance. You might be in an area, unfortunate, where the lands office is close by. But don't be surprised if it's 100 kilometres away. And don't be surprised and don't get disheartened if you get there and for some reason they don't entertain you, which means that they're too busy to talk to you. But on the whole, they will entertain you, they will listen to what you've got to say, but it may take a day, a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks for them to fulfill your requests, i.e. hunt down the original titles, what they have on, and they still use microfiche a lot because a lot of the computers haven't been updated, especially for old title, so it's going to take a little bit of time. Do not put deposits down on land while you're waiting to do this. If it sells, it sells. And land does not sell quickly here. So you do your due diligence as far as titles are concerned. And then you weigh up. If a title comes back and they'll give you a copy, this land was originally owned by XYZ person, and all of a sudden you're getting a story that wasn't owned by that person, it was owned by this person, something's fishy. Now my advice is, as soon as it starts to smell like a sardine, don't even go any further, because you can get trapped in this rabbit hole, down this rabbit hole, and it will go on forever. And what it is things can be so complicated here, and your desire to own something can be so great, you will ignore things at your peril. So it's not an easy process. Even when you get back the original titles, or the last time that land was registered with the titles office, it may be 20 or 30 years ago. So then you've got to do your due diligence on if it was owned by this person, and you've got to do almost like an ancestry.com. You've got to find out who his kids were, and and they inherited the land through conjugal land, and then who his kids were, because the system is ongoing, down to the person that is selling you the land. It can be done, and you can work it out. Just be warned, you may have to do an ancestry trace to find out who you're dealing with. The other things to steer clear of is new development land, where it was supposedly owned by the government for whatever reason, and now it's being divided up and sold off to the people. And they will give you, as an expression of title for that land, a document which states you have paid virtually a bill of sale. And they'll state that because of the backlog in the lands office, it may be 2, 3 or 5 years before you get title issue. Now what really becomes a problem is you look around in a subdevelopment or a development, and there's houses going up everywhere. So you convince yourself it must be right. All these people have bought this block of land. It's usually held, this parcel, in a cooperative type situation. And you think to yourself, it must be okay. I don't know too much about it. These are fellows, they've bought the block of land, and they must believe, and it must be true, that we're going to get the title in 4 and 5 years. Leave that type of thing totally alone. Yes, the majority of time it is correct. You do get the title in 2, 3, 5 years time, but if something happens in between time, again, it's a myriad of problems. You still are on a block of land and you don't have title. Now, once you do your due diligence, you've found out who originally owned it, that the title is now clear, you've traced it through. It doesn't hurt to go down to the barangay captain, sit with him and ask him about the land, whether he knows of any disputes, because everyone must go to the barangay captain. If there's a dispute on anything in a barangay, the first port of call is the barangay captain. Now, this dispute might be going on for a while, and the barangay captain says, I don't personally know the details of any dispute, but you may have to talk to the previous barangay captain if they're still alive. What I'm trying to point out is there is more than just one allowing someone else to do it all for you. You've got to do it yourself. It's complex and complicated if you don't have all your little ducks stacked up in a row. And don't get me wrong, you can acquire land via your wife, ignore all this advice, and nothing may happen. But I'm telling you, this is Murphy's Law, the country of Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And you, as an expat, are already behind the 8 ball before you start. So beware, beware, beware. Do your due diligence, do your tracing, do your surveys on the land. Get a reputable solicitor or lawyer. All these things before you purchase land here. Now, when we're talking about prenda beforehand, it is a common practice in the Philippines to prenda land to increase your holdings. And the good thing about prenda is if you pay a fair price for prenda, when we're talking about prenda, which is, as I said, the situation where it's more like a pawnbroker, and you pay a fair price for it, and you want to at least have the land for a number of years, if not for as long as you're on this planet, pay the fair price. Pay a little bit more than the asking price in the Puruk. Because what will happen is if they can't pay that money back, you, for all intents and purposes, in your lifetime will have that land. As I said, it's not unusual for prenda to go on for 2 years, up to 20 or 30 years, and whatever. But the word, a precautionary word in regard to prenda. Technically, prenda ends when one of the parties become deceased, and then it reverts back to conjugal land. So that agreement, that civil agreement for you to own that particular land or have possession of that land, technically only lasts as long as the person that you gave the 150, 200,000 pesos to. So keep that in mind. Usually the family will honour the prenda because they're supposed to get out of that prenda agreement, pay you back that amount of money you prendered on. Usually all they want to do is get the land and get possession of their estate amounts, and a lot of the times they won't even know the prenda exists. But the prenda can stop for a number of reasons, but it is still a very good system to acquire land for rural purposes. Now, if you prenda land, even at a relatively large amount, you can do a couple of things to protect yourself if you want to improve that land. Within the agreement, you can specify a period of prenda, which means that I want this land for 10 years. And if the vendor agrees, the prenda stays in place for a 10-year period. Now, nothing in the Philippines is hard and fast. Even if you go to court and the legislation is there and the agreement is there in black and white, the sympathy value in this country is taken into account when it comes to the legal system. You're a Westerner standing there and saying, I have a prenda or a title or whatever, and this has happened to me and that's happened to me, and that's the deal I did and that's how much I purchased it for. And then you've got a sibling that turns around and said, yes, but I think that the expat tricked me to get it cheaper, and my family is suffering and he's weeping and God knows what, which they do because they're desperate. There is a good possibility that even though you have the legal right, that they will side with the national. And they will say, the courts will say, sir, can't you come up with an agreement that will be happy on both sides? This is the sticky field you run through when you do anything in the Philippines. It's not impossible to do here. You can acquire properties. You've got to do it with a Filipino national. There are other methods I'm not going to get into, but it's complicated, and even though it's legal, it's not principled, so I won't go there. But today, if you're buying land with a Filipino, your wife, business partner, whomever it is, and everything's rosy when you're doing it, is not tomorrow. So keep that in the back of your head. Be prepared that at any time, whatever improvement you have on that land or put on that land can be taken away from you in one way or another. The possibility is always there. On the good side, many an expat here has purchased land with their wives, lived happily ever after, had some problems and hiccups along the way, but managed to get over them. All I'm trying to say to everybody is it's not cut and dry. You've got to do your due diligence. Information is the key. Don't be in a rush. Don't buy over the internet. Don't even go on what your wife, girlfriend, or family tell you. Be here, work it out for yourself, go through the motions, and that's the safest possible way to buy land here. Now, I probably haven't covered some things that you're interested in or want to know. So, guys, comment, ask the question. If I can answer it, I will. If I don't know the answer to it, I certainly will find out for you and get back to you in another video or via comments. So, that's it for the time being. Remember, guys, subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000. Jen's got a little thing planned for celebration on 1,000. So please subscribe, thumbs up. I look forward to the next vlog with you guys. Take it easy.